Hello, I'm Sravish. This is TrustTalks. And today I have with me Rohit Parchuri, the Chief Information Security Officer at Yext, and also the coolest CISO in the Bay Area. Hi, Rohit. Thank you
Thank you.
for joining us.
That's very kind of you, Travis. Thank you so much. I'm so super glad to be here.
Rohit, let's jump right into it. One of the things that you and I have talked about quite a bit in the past is how the role of the CISO is changing, and there's a lot of pressure in that role. And in addition to being the custodian of security and privacy in the organization, CISOs are now being asked to have a strategic dialogue with boards of directors and explain to the board how the CISO function is creating a positive business impact and enabling trust with customers as well as trust with internal stakeholders. I'd love to kick things off, Rohit, with sharing with the audience, how do you think the role of the CISO should be transformed to becoming trust champions in the organization, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you spoke about half of it in terms of how CISOs are, I think are moving into this new territory, if you may, where they're being looked at as a strategic advisor, strategic business partner, rather than just being able to build the defenses or taking care of the obligations that we have as a company. I think it's much more than that. It's a good thing that we're actually moving into that discipline now. It definitely gives us the voice. For the long time we didn't have that. Two, it enables us to a place where we can start sharing very specific insights on how security director relates into business.
Yeah.
Not the other way around. Right. The way I talk to my peers or I talk to my board is like we're trying to make sure we partner with the business goals, and we're trying to align that with the business goals, not business aligning with security, which of course is never going to be successful on either context. So I think your question around what exactly is the elements that are contributing towards that, and why exactly do we need that trust element built into a CISO, is essentially because we're the ones who are, one, the custodians of trust, two, also making sure how trust translates into business context. What is that trust, right? Trust comes in many forms, many shapes and forms. And I think you being the business leader who can talk through different elements, what's the common narrative that people can understand, the common language people can understand, and how trust directly fits into that. So trust and transparency, I'll also add transparency to that because they're, kind of like cousins. Without one, you can't really do the other. So they're key, right? Of course, trust and transparency, without that, you really cannot do a lot of things. For me personally, I can neither satisfy myself nor my periphery. Periphery being all the business leaders, my peers, etc. So, ultimately, we're all dealing with humans. No matter how many systems, no matter how much automation, the ChatGPTs, Bards of the world, no matter how many of those come, we're still dealing with the people, by, for, and to the people, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to be that way. So I think the way, it doesn't matter which profession you're in, especially in security, without that trust, I think it's going to hinder a lot of different things that you're doing, especially the practices you prescribe. Your success will be highly diminished if you don't have that element of trust. One thing I'll also note is that as security practitioners, we have a lot of different forms of access into systems, into number of different things, resources or assets in the company. What happens with that access? There's a lot of power. With the power comes a lot of responsibility, enormous set of responsibilities that you have to both adhere within yourself and also showcase that with the business. So you better be trustworthy, right? Because you're trying to change a few things. The foundation of that is the trust, and without that you wouldn't go anywhere. So a few things I can think of, like how can we bring this, like I'm talking about all the different things at a strategic level, but let's bring it down to a few examples, and maybe let's tackle that at, on a tactical front. One is metrics, like the philosophy around the metrics. Data never lies. So you got to be honest about the things that you want to have, or factor that into the success of your program, and how you showcase that to the board, to the executive team, to the business leaders, right? So for example, if you have different department leaders you're talking with, how does that go? Like what kind of, what different sets of metrics would you propose? And also, how does that metric that you're talking about, it could be a performance metric, it could be a risk indicator, it could also be a value indicator, depending on how the business operates. So I think, tackling that from a culture standpoint, you would start, putting those together, and it has to be a continuous thing. It's not like a one-time thing. You come up with a metric and say, hey, my job is done. It's not that. I think trust is also a thing where it has to be continuous. So you got to keep proving yourself.
Yeah.
I think once you do that, you will, come to a place where, people do see what exactly you're working on. What's the why behind my practice? And now let's come down to the hows and the whats.
Yeah.
I think that's key, right? I think that's key for people who are, trying to follow, like most often than not, they're trying to follow, the things that you're prescribing.
Yeah.
And this turns into a practice, and ultimately this turns into a culture, right?
Yeah.
So if you're coming into a company and you are the first person, let's say you're not even a CISO, you're maybe a first security practitioner coming in.
Yeah.
Like, you have to build that trust. Like, how do you do that? You have to have milestones enabled. So, I think the best thing you could have is the metrics first. And then second, start thinking about the common narrative that you want to keep talking about. Maybe make use of a framework. A lot of people do this, like a NIST framework or a CIS framework, and showcase, like, currently assess your current posture, and, see what, and also showcase what direction you want to take. And, maybe put out some metrics around it. So people know it's not just about, the lights on, doors open kind of methodology, where it's more operations based, but also you're trying to build maturity into the program. So I would say, like, those would capture the elements on how you can bring trust into your daily, workspace.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, just to summarize what you said, what's lacking in most companies is getting people to understand why we are doing something. And once they understand the why, you share with them the metrics that you're going to measure to satisfy that you're actually doing it, and then to make it streamlined and standardized, come up with a framework that allows you to distribute the requirements across the organization and have the organization follow what's required to deliver it, right? And that enables a culture, because then people get behind the why, but it also puts you in a position, because you're being very data-driven, to do this not only in a transparent fashion, but more importantly, in an accountable fashion, because, like you said, data doesn't lie. So I really love that framework of how to build that culture of trust in an organization. What about the other side, Rohit, which is we have to be trustworthy ourselves, but all of us running technology companies, leading technology companies, we rely on other companies to be trustworthy. And there is a dependency in how we run our businesses, because we rely on them to provide services for us. How do we get vendors to be trustworthy, and how do we evaluate what they tell us?
Yeah, well, you just open a can of worms. It's the vendor risk is it's a pretty big field we need to operate on. And I think, it's evolved definitely, like, since a decade or so. I think we've come to a place where we at least know what level of baselines and benchmarks we need to adhere by, not just ourselves, but also, keep the same standard on the vendor side of things. But that also gave rise to security questionnaires, gave rise to a lot of back and forth in terms of, just relying on a statement doesn't really get you anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. You're doing so and so. Their devils is always in the details, right?
Yeah.
You're asking about encryption. Okay, yeah, we do encryption. What does that mean? A lot of different things.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, the practical approach has always been, having a human connect instead. So the way I deal with vendor risk is we basically just categorize between critical and non-critical vendors. So everybody don't have to go through the same lift.
Yeah.
For the critical, we go beyond, the typical questionnaires or, the compliance certifications request of them, which is where we connect with the team directly.
Yeah.
Most often than not, that request is approved, and we actually get, a space to talk with. Sometimes I get a space to talk with the CISO, a peer of mine, and like, let's talk human to human. Like, what exactly? How can I translate the responses that I got from you, on a certain statement? Yeah. And I pick and choose like a few things that are really important for me, because, ultimately what we're trying to do is we're satisfying our own obligations as a company. We want to make sure the same obligations are being satisfied by our vendor ecosystem.
Sure.
This ecosystem could be a lot many, right? But it gets even more critical if the vendors are touching, your crown jewels, or something that you deem as, maybe within SOX, we can take an example of financial reporting, financial systems, right? So with those, my scrutiny is a little more, but it all begins with the connect with the person and the team on the other end, and then we peel the onion layer by layer. The security questionnaires, is something, I have this, kind of what love-hate relationship with, I guess. It satisfies a few things, it checks a few boxes, and it's good bureaucratic process. But beyond that, I don't see really value in that. So
I am just shocked, Rohit. I am just shocked that you love security questionnaires. There's a part of you that loves security questionnaires. That's just shocking to me. I've always wondered, Rohit, why in security questionnaires nobody asks the question, a few simple questions, such as, at the time of writing the security questionnaire, how many controls in your security program are failing today? It's a very simple question, but it really gets rid of all the BS in this kabuki theater of security questionnaires. Because the reality is every CISO knows that every control is not passing all the time. But now it gives you a level of maturity to have a conversation around, okay, great. I agree. I understand. I don't have perfect 100% control validation either. So tell me why it's not. Why is it failing? Let's have a conversation around it. But nobody's asking that question. Everybody expects each other to be perfect. And we all know we're not perfect, which is really ridiculous to me. And so I would love to live in a world where we can just be open with each other, be transparent with each other, CISO to CISO, and have a dialogue on how we can all get better, but also support each other. That if you're willing to be transparent with me and show me how you're improving, then great. I would love to build a relationship with you.
That is absolutely true. Like, let me answer one of your questions about why do I have love towards possibly towards security questionnaires. So this began back when I was with ServiceNow. Not going to give you the whole story. I don't want to waste the time here, but I'll keep it very brief. One of the things I figured out with security questionnaires is that one of the fundamental things that when we're getting, so on the receiving side of security questionnaires, by the way. So, we have a customer, who wants us to check a few boxes. Okay, so they'll send a questionnaire, we got to send the responses back. So one thing that helped me enable my control landscape is through the questionnaires. Because now it's not so much I'm proposing something. Yes, I've been proposing that, but I didn't really see anything come out of it. Now customers asking that, so that's a revenue risk. So let's because this, I think it's more of a forcing function or a catalyst possibly. That okay, now we finally know that the questions that we posed, in our risk landscape is also being asked by our customer base, or partner base. Now let's make sure we also, think about that. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm like, okay, maybe I can make better use of this rather than simply responding. I'll capture one form of questionnaire and put that, to my team. My team being, my superiors and, back at ServiceNow saying that, okay, this is important and this is why, because this directly connects back into that, into the deal that we're trying to make.
I love that idea, because if you could have the discipline where you take commitments that we are making in customer contracts, commitments that we're making with things like cyber risk insurance policies that we're signing up for, and commitments that we're being asked to prove as part of these security questionnaires, and translate that into not only our security and privacy program, but also the budget requests for more funding and more resources, then you're able to have a business conversation with the CFO and the CEO and the board on why we need to improve. And ultimately, it's a business decision on whether we're going to fund it or not, because if we don't, then it's either going to slow down growth or create liability for the company. But then it's a business decision.
Exactly.
And I think I'm still yet to see tooling that has connected those two lines. Do you think that tooling would be used by CISOs?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about that. thinking about the CISO role in general, what are we trying to do? We're really the messengers of different things that are happening, both outward and inward at a
Yeah.
company from a
Yeah.
security standpoint, of course.
Sure.
But when we do that, we don't have like a translation framework doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
We have to be very, very subjective about the things that we gather. And a simple example would be, a customer of mine, customer A, is coming to me saying that, hey, I need a certain level of maturity when it comes to data security. Data security is being talked about
Yeah.
nowadays, very more often than it was. So I'm taking that as an example, right? So what does that mean? That means data classification, taxonomy, policy enforcements, number of different things.
Yeah.
Each of them are projects onto themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not a simple task. It's not
Yeah.
a simple, a single requirement. We can't simply say yes. We just have to peel back the onion there.
Yeah.
So essentially, when we have that, what I do is I take that response and put like maybe a subjective analysis on that and showcase, okay, this is how I think it's going to be appropriate for us to start building this out. So all the customers, customer A, B, C, who's asking that requirement, we can satisfy that. So in a sense, we could, upsell software. We could, create new deal channels. We could, completely go at a different market altogether just because we've satisfied these key initiatives.
Yeah.
But that translation is very subjective and it doesn't back up a framework that I could use. Like take NIST, for example, right?
Yeah.
If I'm talking about the program execution, I can go back and say, okay, NIST prescribes this and this is how it actually comes to life.
Yeah.
Now with these translations, I don't have anything to go back to except my own opinions, my own thoughts.
Yeah.
And that some way have to be converted into the dollars. And that's something I also don't have like a proper number on. So to your question, a long-winded answer of saying yes. I think everybody would agree that we would need something like that.
Love it. Rohit, changing topics a little bit. There's ChatGPT is in the news quite a bit the last couple of months. And there's lots of people that are saying that they should build ChatGPT application that answers security questionnaires. How do you trust the responses you're going to be getting from vendors now? If somebody ends up using a tool like ChatGPT to generate an answer and, God forbid, generate a policy document and then just attach it and provide it, and it actually looks real and it looks credible, how do we get to the point where we start to look at the risk of people doing things like this to answer vendor assessments?
So great question. And by the way, one of the recent products of Yext Chat, we actually have, we've been doing generative AI for some time now. So ChatGPT connects into that. So technically we're actually in that space. So I want to talk about this in a few different ways. So one is, so just because ChatGPT is here, I don't think there's a huge change in how people are responding to questionnaires. What might be happening though, to your point, is that it's more systematic now. You simply type that in and you would get a response. Okay, what's my, how do I define my information security policy? Okay, you get a canned response, right? You copy that, paste that into questionnaire, you're done with it. I think it's more automated. It's much more easy for you to get that info, but that doesn't mean that people were searching on the internet and getting the same response in the past. So ChatGPT is just enabling maybe different channels that you can get that and making it more streamlined, I guess. So I don't think it's a huge change to that, but I think where I feel, maybe the trust would be tarnished is the fact that, one, when you're requesting for or asking a specific question, the way ChatGPT operates is going through like this information overhaul in the memory, and it kinds of figures out what's the best response that I can provide. It all depends on the weights. It all depends on the priority of an answer, right? Ultimately, and it provides that. It's a very generic response, but at the same time, it says this is the most popular one. So pretty much everybody's using that. What happens there is that everybody is going to come back with that. And we're like, okay, are you seriously doing this? Because when I go back and type in ChatGPT, for example, I get the same results. So like, I think what it does is I think one thing in security that we should never be is to have a common mindset about how we run the program or how we think about deploying controls. Without diversity, we can't build trust. Without diversity, we can't really build effective programs. So I think that's where I feel, that might be tarnishing the trust that maybe we've established that in the company, but now not so much, because we're trying to just get the canned responses out of an AI tool and just putting that into it, which is exactly why the human connection matters. Which is exactly why you also talked about this, is where what does this really mean?
Yeah.
Like, I know your statement, you're talking about a statement. This is something I also do, like a canned response. But what does that really mean? Like, what is the program that you're working on? So I would rather depend on the response directly from a person that I'm talking with, and ask follow-up questions about that mean. So maybe go down a few layers from the response. I think that's where you'll get to the core, of the message instead.
Yeah, I love it. Rohit, one question that always comes up is, as security leaders, you're constantly inspired by other security leaders, people that you look up to in the community, people that were your mentors, your bosses, et cetera. Who comes to mind as somebody who has inspired you to elevate security and make it more a trust function, and who does it well in your mind?
Yeah, so I can think about maybe a couple people. One person I worked with in my previous company, her name is Heather Eggers. I think now she leads the compliance or GRC function at Zoom.
Nice.
So she's been, I was a peer with her when I was working with Collective Health, and I was doing the security function. She was doing the compliance function. I think, the one thing that she espouses is the fact that she thinks about, although she comes from the compliance background, she's not a checkbox kind of a person, which is exactly what I liked about her.
Yeah.
Her message, or the way that she propounded this message, is that's where we start, but not where we end.
Yeah.
We can build that foundation to begin with, and we have all the things that we can start working off of, because we know there's a certain baseline that everybody's looking for.
Yeah.
But to build an effective program, to build right checks and balances, right provenance for that matter, has to go beyond that.
Yeah.
So I think I've learned a ton from her, and I think she is definitely an embodiment of, a trust champion, in my opinion. So that's one. And the other person I think I've met maybe once, but I've been, on the receiving side of his newsletters. This person's name is Clint Gibler.
Mm-hmm.
He does this thing, security newsletters, and I would encourage, all the security practitioners and also non-security practitioners to take a look at that. Is a TLDR Sec newsletter. Nice. It's really good. I think he leads the security program up, in I think at R2C, the developers of SemGrep, the static analysis tool. One thing I liked about the newsletter so much is that he has different sections, and each section talks about the trust, about how you're trying to gain the trust of a certain program, of a certain element within your program. And then he has these very quirky anecdotes for each of them. I think it's just fun reading the newsletter, and also seeing, okay, well, there's a message beyond that, and he also focuses on the morals. But yeah, I would say those two people are definitely something I've been inspired with.
Rohit, when you're going through a security incident or you're dealing with a tough security problem, what kind of food or drinks do you like to have?
Oh God. So let me give this disclaimer first, even before I say that. So I have a few static things through my day. So one is my yoga meditation, 2, my food, 3, my sleep. Nothing comes in between them. I make damn sure nothing comes in between them. Although for the food, I think when I'm dealing with stressful situations, incident definitely is one. I think I'll try to reduce the intake of the food instead, and maybe mostly stay with the non-meat side of things for that day or that couple of days, because there's more clarity in your thought process, and it's less drowsy, of course. So I would just cut down on that. Sorry, it's not too funny, but I think for me that could be the best answer I could think about.
So no vanilla chocolate sundae. It's actually try to be more healthy when you're being stressful.
Oh God, exactly. Because you got to think clear, man. When you're dealing with an incident, and especially that incident is something that's impactful for your customer base, you got to be on your A game. So I would definitely reserve that post the incident instead. Maybe during the RCA, I'll go out and possibly get a sundae.
Well, Rohit, thank you so much for joining us on Trust Talks today. You are a true trust champion for the work that you're doing, not only with the community, but also at your company. And we all salute you for that. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for the kind words, and I'm loving it. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Rohit.